very much, Lauren, Bruno. The floor is yours.
Thank you.
Thank you so very much. We're delighted with the invitation. Thank you so very much for having us, for organizing today, and we hope that it'll be useful for everybody. You guys can all see my screen now?
Yeah.
All
yes,
right.
we can, Lauren. Perfect.
Thank you again, and thank you, Ophelia. Thank you, Bruno, for joining me in the task of today. We really do hope that today's conversation will be fruitful and useful to enable you all, members and committee leaders alike, to feel more confident in the process of that we're undergoing together towards a new museum definition. There's still those who ask why ICOM is conducting this work, as the current definition meets the needs of some members within the ICOM community. But for the greater and vocal community, of museum professionals from around the world, the current definition is not satisfactory and does not address what many museums have and should become. Somewhat like what Ophelia brought to the table just at the beginning, mentioning some of the ways that museums have gotten involved in their current situations. Since 2015, ICOM has been exploring this topic, and in 2019, it was evident that change was necessary, but that more consultation was needed among constituents within the organization. The ICOM defined methodology was designed precisely with this in mind, with this consultation. And the multi-step process consisting of 4 rounds of consultation is now at its midway point. So it's very exciting to be right in the middle of this process. And we have now collected and analyzed what committees said were the key words or concepts that needed to appear in the museum definition, which in and of itself confirms the need for an updated definition that it's in line with our plans.
Okay, so also I'd like to thank ICMEMO for organizing in such a short notice this workshop. I know it's a hard work and we are very happy to be here with you. And of course, I'm very happy to be again with my colleague Laurent and my dear friend, because we have become great friends during this process. And also I see that some of our colleagues from the committee are here, and I appreciate very much your presence supporting this presentation, because one of the first things that I would like to say is that what we have accomplished so far with this methodology and the results from Consultation 2, of course, it is the product of the huge diversity within ICOM, but also it's the result of the great engagement of all the members in this committee. This is really, truthfully, the result of a collaborative work. So as you can see here in this image that most of you already know, it is a summary of our methodology, and we are currently in Consultation 3, which is step 6 that you can see marked in blue, which is the opportunity for committees to evaluate those key terms that we have received from Consultation 2. We know that we have been pushing committees very hard with this work, but we are proud of the fact that we are returning the list of key terms and words to committees for them to judge which are the most important and even how they want to apply the term. So this is a very exciting process because it gives us the opportunity to really dialogue with committees and members through this survey that is based on qualitative and quantitative analysis of the results. So from here, we will build on what you tell us to going forward, as the upcoming steps consist in analyzing this evaluation of terms and then drafting proposals for a new definition within the ICOM defined standing committee. Once more, after that stage, we will submit for consultation to committees prior to the final vote in Prague. So this methodology aims to reach consensus within the very large and diverse ICOM family, which we know it's a big challenge, but we are very excited, not only with the possible result, but with the entire process. As museologists and as museum professionals, it's very interesting to see what ICOM members and committees think that it's important to be in a museum definition for the 21st century.
So today we're going to be presenting you information that came out from consultation 2 and mixed in with an explanation of consultation 3. So we're going to be bouncing back and forth between those two things. In this slide, you can see the response rate that we had overall from consultation 2, which was 54%, which is a very high response rate. But we also wanted to point out something that we think is important, since people had been asking about it, because this appears therefore that 46% of committees did not respond. But it is important to notice or to point out the fact that some of those, especially the national committees, for example, 56 national committees didn't respond, but 15 of them appeared inactive or in organization in 2020, which in fact implies that a smaller percentage of active committees were the ones that didn't respond. So, for example, here on this slide, you can see the response rate from each of the 4 types of constituents that were questioned: national committees, international committees, regional alliances, and affiliated organizations. We had a very high response rate, for example, from the international committees, which had 81%. So congratulations to all of you guys. To regional alliances, we had 71%, and then a very low response rate, which was to be expected from the affiliated organizations. So with that in mind, we included these 2 response rates to kind of just give a sense where, in terms of an ICOM response rate, so if we were to get rid of the amount of affiliated organizations, it's almost a 60% response rate from ICOM committees directly. And then within that of ICOM committees, those that are active, well, there was 65.5% of active committees actually participating in this. So it's an extremely high response rate, which we're very, very happy about.
Yeah, and here just as well, you can see the distribution of response rates through different regions represented in national committees. So for example, we realized that we did not have too many responses from Africa or even from the Arab states, which means that now we are working really hard specifically directly with some committees so that they can engage in this process and participate in consultation too. But also another thing that we realized after a detailed investigation was that the committees that did not respond to consultation 2, in their majority, were smaller committees with a small membership or recently established committees. There were even committees with 0 number of official members, which may explain lower participation among national committees in general. So ICOM Define is making a great effort at this point to contact these committees that did not participate in order to facilitate their participation and increase the rate of NCs in the next stages. Next slide, please. Yeah. So here you can see a general research results that we have received in consultation 2. We have actually 97 responses from committees. 97 committees responded to the survey. Only 96 were effective responses because one of the responses were a blank and empty feedback. And from these 97 responses, we have obtained 1,659 terms, around 17 terms per response, with 74% of the terms had descriptions, which is a really high percentage, which gave us a lot of qualitative work to be done. Thanks to the analysts, we managed to work with all this data. And then after first analysis of the data, the analysts arrived at 2,085 terms concepts, considering a review in which they decomposed some of the terms. So that's why we ended up with even more terms, because, for example, in case of space for inclusion, they considered to separate the 2 words, and so that they could consider the meaning of each word. So they consider space as a word and inclusive as another word, of course, keeping the connections between the words in terms of qualitative work. So this was a little bit of the work that was done in the first stage of analysis.
Of those 2,000 terms that came up, those were the independent terms from each of the committees, but they were able to basically boil it down to 127 terms. So 127 distinct terms were were surfaced as a result of consultation 2. What you can see in this slide is actually something very exciting. And Bruno and I were recalling as we were preparing for this presentation, how exciting it was for us when we first saw this, because we were like, oh my God, what are the terms the committee said? And so you can see the top terms. This is the terms that received at least 30%, or were mentioned by at least 30% of committees. And what's really very interesting to signal is that it is a mix of the current terms, the terms that are in the actual definition, and new terms, right? So both of those are very present. Both the new ones and the original terms, or the current terms, are available for you all to be evaluating in this round of consultation. Also, I just wanted to mention briefly that many of these slides that you're going to be looking at during the presentation are taken directly from the data analyst report, which is available for everybody to see. So it's very important also that you are now aware of how committees feel about each of these terms. So as your committee is making the decisions, it's very important that you consider some of the terms that are proposed by other committees as well. And in some cases, you may not have considered those terms in the first place when you proposed your terms, but it's interesting to take a look at all of the terms and to just consider what professionals, museum professionals from around the world with distinct backgrounds and both distinct professional backgrounds and geographic backgrounds are wanting to see in a new definition. So it's really important that you take into consideration all of the terms. In the report, you will be able to see, this is the slide that shows the ones that received 30% or more. And then all of the terms, all 127 terms, are available in the report for you all to take a look at. So you can see here and basically here all the way down to the last 1% of these terms.
Yeah, so we, based on this report and all these 127 terms, we took the task of creating a survey for consultation 3. So we needed, of course, to really interpret this data and work so that they could suit a structured survey for committees to evaluate the terms. So for this, we had to change a little bit how the terms were presented. And while the report provides a complete list of 127 terms proposed in consultation 2, consultation 3 included all terms suggested in at least 3% of responses. So we eliminated the terms that only appeared once, for example, or twice. And then all subsequent, like Laura is showing, exactly. So these terms were not in the survey because we had to make a cut somewhere to prioritize. But at the same time, we did include, we consider that we did include a great amount of terms for you to evaluate. And also another aspect of this survey is that it is structured in different dimensions, which I will explain in a while. But right here, you can see how each dimension proposes questions for you to evaluate in the terms. So the first question asks for a selection of the preferred term or terms. In this case, we have in the dimension entity, because we only have 5 terms that were most frequent in the responses. We are only asking for 1 response, so you get to choose 1 between the 5. And this is the first question. Then the second question, Laura, yeah. The second question actually asks committees to give their opinion, indicating if any term have limitations, either in legal limitations or bureaucratic or political impediments for their applicability in specific concepts. So here, if you mark a term that you think that in your context, in the context of your country, or in the context of your international community, do not work for some impediments, it will open another field for you to fill with the reason why this term could not be used in a museum definition. And we are really looking forward to see if there are impediments to the terms that might appear. And then finally, the third question is the opportunity for committees to suggest a term that they believe is imperative in a definition and that were not there in the selection of terms from consultation 2, which does not factor in the list. So this will only be considered if mentioned repeatedly by other committees as well. We can only consider a new term if it's really recurrent in the responses. So that's why we created this third question, and committees will be asked to include one term per dimension. So you have 7 opportunities to answer to these 3 questions per dimensions. And I will explain the dimensions next. Yes, Laura,
yeah, I wanted to point out one thing, that these are screenshots taken directly from the survey online. And also, you don't have to answer the questions 2 and 3 for each of the dimensions. So the only thing that has to be responded to, is where you actually select and rank the terms, as you'll see further along. But this of limitations and applicability and any suggestions of a further term is not obligatory to respond. So you can just jump over this in case it's not pertinent to your committee.
So in what refers to the dimensions that structure the survey, we based ourselves in something that was proposed by the analysts when they analyzed the qualitative information about terms and in the descriptions that were presented to us in consultation 2. Here you can see how external analysts have arrived at the 7 dimensions, completely based on the received data and on the qualitative analysis of the keywords and concepts, taking into consideration their descriptions. So we did not invent this by ourselves. These were dimensions that surfaced from the analysis. And as you can see, the percentages here indicate in how many responses each dimension appear. So for example, the dimension entity appears 68% of the responses. Another important information that we got from this analysis was, for example, regarding the dimension values and issues regarding the museum. This was a big discussion in Kyoto, if a definition should have values or not. And here in our survey, it appears that 96% of the responders indicated a word or several words that represent values. So for us, it is important to consider that if 96% of people are presenting values, or if 97% of people are saying that museums should provide experiences, this means that these dimensions are important in a museum definition. So that's why we are considering these 7 dimensions. And in the next slide, you can see that they are present. This is, again, part of our survey, indicating that each section of the survey refers to one dimension. So we have entity, what a museum is, entity qualifier, what qualifies a museum, object, subject, what are the museum's objects and subjects, action, function, which refers to what museum does, experience, what do people experience at a museum, social values, what values shape museums, and target and relationships, which means who museums work for and the nature of their relationship.
And I wanted to add another aspect, which is the 7 dimensions we chose to follow. It seemed very recommendable to follow the use of the 7 dimensions because it came from the independent and external analysis that these 3 people did as a result of studying what was received. And we felt that it was a good way for us to structure the survey because it allowed it to be a bit easier for committees to handle rather than, going through a list of 127 words and just having to choose them. We structured them in a way that was a bit friendlier, we think, but also it allows committees to have a bit of a better understanding of how, in a sense, what's the global application of the term. So by inserting the terms within the dimensions, it allows you to get a sense of what the term means. And in some cases, as we're going to be going over in a little bit going forward, some of the terms appear in multiple dimensions. And so this allows committees to let us know how they wish the term to be applied. So that is very important to keep in mind, the reasons for having decided to go over this in this way. So as you can see here, this is basically what it's going to look like for all of the other dimensions other than the first one, which was entity. For all of the subsequent dimensions, you will see this brief introductory component with the basic question. Also, the page numbers in the report, in case you want to go direct to the page numbers of the report, which we're going to go over some of the information that's included in the reports. We don't have the time to go through each one of the dimensions, but in this case, experience is, what do people experience at the museum? That is the idea of what it is that they're supposed to, what you're supposed to be ranking here. And you all get to choose the words that you want. So you select, and in each case, there's a different amount. So for the case of experience, there's 5 terms that you can select, and then we're asking you to rank those terms. So let us know which is the one of most important, greatest importance for your committee, and the least importance of all of the terms that are that you all select.
Yeah, so here, for example, again, and now we're going to be going back and forth from the report to the survey so that you can really understand how it was conceived, because the idea is really for you guys to inform us not only what are the preferred terms to be used in the definition, but also how you wish us to use these terms. Because we have in each dimension specificities between the interpretation of terms. So here, for example, as you can see in the dimension experience, as Laurent was just showing in the actual survey, we do have a huge difference between words. For example, we have education that appears 71% of the responses. So we could think, oh, okay, so education is a word that definitely should be there. But at the same time, we have different meanings that appear for education. And we have also other words that appear that could be related to education, or that could be completely different from education. So how should we use this word? Is it an experience, or is it, some of you might be asking why education is here as experience and not necessarily as a function or action of the museum? This is something that we considered. And that's why some of the terms are repeated in the different dimensions in the form. I think we can go to the next slide. Yeah. So for example, here you can see, and this is present throughout the report of the analyst in each dimension, you can see the geographic distribution of the terms, which term are more representative of each region. And for example, education here again is appear in 100% of the responses in the Americas. So this is really expressive. At the same time, it's shown 67% in Africa, 67% in Europe, and 50% in the Arab states. So there is, of course, some difference, and 55 in the Asia and Pacific. And other terms are more prominent in these different regions. So the terms that are marked in light blue, they are actually higher terms in specific regions, and those in the more darker green are the ones that appeared the most and the most representative. So this is, we are encouraging you here to really look at the report and not only look at the quantitative analysis of how much a term appear in terms of frequency per committee, but in how they can actually be used in a definition, if they are representative of the different regions within ICOM, if they are really a term that should be used instead of other similar terms, and more importantly, what meaning should we consider for each term? Yes, Laura. So another aspect of the terms that have been analyzed in the external analysis are their meanings. And here you have an example of a meaning map that we are also presenting in the report, and that helped us to understand how terms could be approximated or how terms could be actually present in more than one dimension. Here, for instance, you have multiple meanings for education. Education could be seen in the responses as transmission, dissemination, sharing of knowledge, but it could also be perceived as learning, informal or lifelong learning, but also in a third meaning or conception of the term, we see education as a vehicle to gain critical thinking. So in these three perceptions of education, education could be related to more other terms, or from one side knowledge, but also from another side dialogue, which is a term that also appeared a lot in this dimension. So this kind of meaning maps where each balloon size represent the frequency of a term, you can see not only the terms that appear the most, but the different terms to which they relate. And that's why we think that it's important to consider, again, not only the quantitative data, but also how these terms are being interpreted based on their descriptions. Everything that you see here is fully based on what we received in the survey for consultation 2.
So now going back to the survey itself, this is again where you can see what we were just looking at before, where you're asked to rank. You choose your 5, you rank them. This is only the top version. It's important to point out that the terms appear in the rate of frequency. So in this case, for example, the first word is education. You see that it's in 71% of the time, but we wanted to show you this together, but this is what we drew from the data analysis report, but this is the actual survey. So you will notice that between education and dialogue, which are the top two terms under experience, according to the analysts, we've also included inclusivity and community or social as a kind of experience that you can have. This can be an inclusive experience, or it can be a community experience. And so we wanted to, again, include terms that we think that some committees may prefer to have as an experience rather than as one of the other dimensions. So that's why when you're going through your survey and you notice, that's weird, why is there inclusivity and community or social when it doesn't appear in the list by the analysts? That's the reason, because what we've done is stick in certain terms into various different dimensions. And it's important to point out that when you see 2 asterisks next to a word, it means that it appears in another dimension. And if your committee is going to select one of the words that has 2 asterisks, make sure, double check that you're choosing it and sticking it into the dimension that you feel is the most appropriate for your committee. So yep, I think that's all I wanted to say. Just to mention, for example, education, as you see, is in 71% of the times. Inclusivity is 66% of, there was mentioned in 66% of responses, and dialogue, community and social was mentioned in 51%. And so that's why they're in order of frequency, of overall frequency within the survey. Is that what you were going to say, Bruno?
That's what I was going to say, is that because it was a decision of ICOM Define to present the terms in order of frequency so that committees could see what other committees have proposed and think that is more important in each category, which gives you the opportunity to change your mind or to push a term that's not so present in terms of frequency, but that feels very important for your committee.
Correct. We've heard feedback from some, for example, where they hadn't even thought to include the word dialogue necessarily, but once they saw the term dialogue and they noticed that it had a high percentage, they said, oh, this is a really good term for us. We like it. We hadn't thought of it in the beginning, but we see that other committees are into the term. And so we're going to put in a sense, our vote onto that term. So we encourage you to definitely take a look at all of the terms on the list, so that, even though it is in the order of frequency, take a look at even the words that are towards the bottom of the list, because it doesn't necessarily mean that they're not good terms. It just means that not all committees have necessarily, or not many committees may have mentioned it, but they're, they're perfectly legitimate terms as well.
And so, as Laurent mentioned before, the terms that appear with 2 asterisks indicates that they are present in multiple dimensions, and that was a decision that we made so that we could really evaluate terms and test them being used in different ways. And here you can see why. Because one part of the results from consultation 2 that was presented to us by the analysts was that different terms presented multiple meanings. So specifically some terms, and here you can see a few examples, but they are not exhaustive. There are many other examples throughout the report of terms that really appear with multiple meanings according to the descriptions provided in consultation 2. These multiple meanings may indicate various possibilities of applying these terms in a definition, and for this reason, they appear in different dimensions of the survey in order to allow committees to better indicate how they feel a term should be used. So if your committee selects a term with asterisks, be sure to include it in the dimension that your committee feels it's most appropriate, because they will reappear in another dimension. Here you can see, for example, sustainability is an example that we like to call attention for, because, and we have even discussed that with the sustainability working group, because this is a term that can show different meanings. For example, some committees have indicated the word sustainable to refer as a museum entity qualifier, such as a sustainable space or sustainable institution, which means that in this case, sustainability or sustainable are more related to the idea of permanence in a way of how museums can be sustainable. But on the other hand, the term also appear indicated as a value or a social value related to the environment when it is shown as sustainability with a specific description that indicates that it should be used as a value. So the question is, how should we use the term? Even though it is a term that appeared in high frequency, we need more elements from your evaluation to indicate how this term should be used in a definition.
And so one of the, we mentioned this before, but we think that it's important to point it out once more, that one of the dimensions that analysts considered received the most amount of mentions was social values, which received in 96% of the responses, committees included in some form a social value. The top social values that were linked, which were mentioned, were diversity, inclusivity or inclusiveness, accessibility, sustainability, and service to society. So while service to society is a concept that's present in the current definition, with roots in museology from the late 60s and the early 70s, it's clear that for many, there are other values that need to be explicitly considered at the core of museum work. So it's absolutely essential that we include, for some committees, we include these terms into a new definition. With that said, it's important to point out that ICOM Define is aware that some of these terms and others, so some of these terms and even the term values itself and other terms within the consultation may have wide and sometimes elusive meanings. We're very much aware of that, but we also feel that that's part of the strength and adaptability of this process and of these terms as well. So in each context, terms can be shaped to fit into the reality or need of each committee or each region. So values, for example, might mean something very different in different places. So might accessibility, so might the term interpretation. So a lot of these terms may mean different things in different places. And we actually think that that's a benefit, because in a sense, it makes a definition that is very, that's flexible, right? It's adaptable in different contexts.
Yeah, so here you can also see another example of the meaning maps regarding values, and you can see that we have a multiplicity of values and some of them are very close to each other. But an interesting example, because it shows that the values that were presented, in a way, they are related to other elements in the definition. So for example, here you have accessibility, diversity, and inclusivity or inclusive, which is very much connected to the idea of an open to the public institution, which is an entity qualifier. So the choice of some terms may determine how they're going to be used in relation to other terms already in the definition or that will be in the definition. On the other side, we also have other values, some of them which are already in the definition, such as service to society. They are connected to new values that appeared in this consultation, such as sustainability. So how are we going to relate this word, and should we include both of them? Should we include only one of them? Those are things that we really want to know better before drafting definitions from you guys in your responses to consultation 3.
So this is the last of the dimensions that is presented, and we wanted to just bring it up because it might be confusing, or it's been signaled as a tiny bit confusing for some people, not clear what exactly is meant by it. So we can see in this case that basically the idea of targets and relationship is who the museum is working for and what is the nature of that relationship. And so in this case, we've included a couple of terms that weren't here originally. So for example, humanity was incorporated into this dimension as well. So once more, you can see the how we've included certain terms in multiple dimensions. And really, as Bruno has just said, we're very happy to be able to get your feedback on these terms. This is an opportunity for ICOM Define to gain a sense for the preferred words and the concepts that are to be included in the new definition. And we really hope that you guys will take the time to analyze these terms and take into consideration the frequency of these terms, you know, the fact that you may not have seen them in the first place or consider them in the first place, but when you realize other parts of the world have included these terms, you may consider them once more. So with that said, this is the opportunity for you guys to manifest your preference over terms. And even those terms that may not be top on the list, well, they're there, they're available for you guys to be able to consider them. And once again, as Bruno says, this will enable us to gain a sense of their acceptance, the general inclination that committees have and members have for these words or concepts as we go forth in integrating them into the draft proposals of a new definition.
Yeah, here you can see how to contact us. This is our email. We are open to receive any question that you may have and any comment. So far, even in this consultation, we have received several positive feedbacks, people who really like to see the results of consultation too, but also some criticism that helped us to revise a little bit of the survey. So really in the first week when we launched it, we need to do a small revision, and we did. That's why you received a second email. If you are chair of any committee, you have received a second email with an updated version, because we are really open throughout this process. We really encourage you to send your concerns and your questions at any moment of the process. And here you can also see a screen, the screen of the member space page, where you can find the full report of consultation 2. The examples that we gave throughout this presentation were examples taken from the report that informed us in order to create the survey for consultation 3. So please go through the report. We know it is a big document, and that's also why we have created an abbreviated version. You can also check the abbreviated version that you have received in your emails, but everything is there. If you have the time, go through all the material, because it's worth it. So ICOM Define has the tough task of proposing a new definition that takes into consideration the diversity of membership, committees, and the museum profession worldwide, all within the structure of how ICOM representation works, which is a really big challenge, and we are really committed to that. Not only Laura and myself, all the members of ICOM Define, and I know all of you guys involved in this process. So as we have been stating since the beginning, participation is key to this process to arrive at a representative definition. So take part in the process and be aware of the next steps on our member space page, where all the material produced is available, including the full report from consultation 2, as I was just saying. We are really proud of the results that we have so far, but we really count on your participation moving forward. And we are looking forward to your answers to consultation 3. So reach us if you need any assistance throughout the process. We're really excited to hear from you, and we are hoping that all committees could enjoy this very interesting exercise that we are proposing. Thank you very much.
Thank you so much, everybody, and we're open to any questions that you might have.
Lauren, thank you, Bruno. Thank you so much. We already have a few questions that have been sent in, I don't know, publicly or to me through the chat. And also, if you can please post the link where people can find more information on ICOM Define.
Yes, give me 1 second and I will get you the link. You have to log in. You have to log into your member space, but what I'm doing is I'm going to give you the link directly to it, and then probably once you click on that link, it'll tell you to log in with your member space information, but give me 1 second and I'll get that for you.
Okay, while you're getting that, maybe you can think simultaneously, multitask, and think of the answer to this question while Bruno is also might want to take it. Linda says many thanks for such an important work. It's great. In parallel, she wants to know, where is ICOM work on code of ethics that is so connected with museum definition as we saw in Kyoto?
Yeah, that's a good question, because we have started initially, I think last year, we started working together with the Code of Ethics committee, because they were also engaged in updating the Code of Ethics, and they did already a survey that a lot of us have participated in. But then as the process moved forward, the Code of Ethics, the responsible people for the Code of Ethics decided to wait. I cannot give you an official answer, but maybe they can present you with more details, but they decided to wait to see how the definition process is going to go, because they consider that the museum definition is strictly connected to the Code of Ethics. And so they might do a second survey along the way with more details, asking for elements from committees to update in the Code of Ethics, but of course also considering the museum definition, if we have a new one or not. But even so, they need to wait for the process to be accomplished in order to proceed. That's the last information that I got from them. Maybe they have new updates, but that's all we got so far.
Thank you, Bruno. Thank you so much. And everyone, Lauren has posted the link, which, as she said, you first need to go into member space. The next question is from Solomon Alemayehu Gutema from Ethiopia, who is concerned, given the state of museums and local museums in Ethiopia, particularly northern Ethiopia, being taken over by warlords. And he wants to know, and if you can answer this question in relation to developing countries, what do you mean when you say accessibility in museum, while the museum is for the society? And if you
yeah, I think Bruno can also answer, but I think this is part of what's one of these terms that might have multiple meanings in different parts of the world. I think in terms of accessibility, there's accessibility, for example, here in Costa Rica, accessibility is highly considered as a matter of people with diverse capacities. So building ramps in your museum and making sure that there's things, signs in Braille so people can access them. But on the other hand, there's the notion of accessibility in terms of being open to the public and who's available, who has the right to see what's in a museum. So again, it's one of these terms that we actually feel are a very strong term because it has so many meanings and can be adaptable to different contexts, and different committees can really consider those terms and really exploit the term and what that term can mean in their specific context. That may, in the case of Ethiopia, it may be very important to talk about accessibility in terms of who has access to the collections, right? Bruno, I don't know if you wanted to add something.
Yeah, no, just to add that that's why it's important to look at the report and really see where the terms appear the most, because I know that, for example, accessibility is a term that is very present in Latin American committees, because it is a really important notion for Latin American museums, but not only. I think it's also important in North America, for instance, because it of course, like Laurent said, in the history of the term, it has to do with specifically creating ways for people with disabilities to access the museum physically. But in contemporary discussions, it's much more related to a general way of eliminating barriers so that society can access the museum, all people from society. So in that way, I like what Laurent said about how flexible some terms is, because the fact accessibility is a good example, because the fact that it have multiple interpretations, the interpretations are actually complementary from each other. They don't exclude another possibility. So we can have accessibility in a more instrumental way, but you can also have accessibility as a term much more closer to inclusion and to open to the public. And these interpretations actually complement each other.
So I just included up here, since Bruno mentioned where the terms may have been mentioned, you can take a look at that here. are there any other questions? We really hope that you can see that the intention was to make this survey, even though we're pushing you really hard, to make the survey itself as simple to fill out as possible. And at the same time, also mention that as committees, you are entitled to decide how you are going to go forth in the consultation. So we've been saying this all along the process, but it's important that we know that some committees have done a tremendous amount of work. SECA or ICOM, Brazil, Czech Republic. They're committees that have done a ton of work in advance. And so this time around chose to work with all of that information to come to their responses for consultation 3. In other cases, for example, in Costa Rica, we're a small committee, but in certain stages of the consultation, we opened it to other museum professionals. In this specific consultation, we sent out a Google form to all of our members, having it open only to the members. So committees can really go about doing this as they see is most appropriate for their committee. And with that said, you have not too much time left to do this because the deadline is the end of this month. We extended it by 10 days considering the European vacations. So do keep in mind that the deadline is the end of the month. So you have basically 17 days to get this into us. But we do hope that it's kind of fun. When I was filling it out for my own purposes, for my own 2 committees, I really enjoyed the exercise. So we hope that you all will as well.
Thank you so much, Lauren. Thank you, Bruno. There's no further questions written in. So can you please just raise your hand or just take the microphone and raise the questions, and then we'll move into figure out. We're 36 participants, and not except for IC Memo, there aren't a lot of the same committee. So when we break out into, well, first, does anyone have any comments, not just questions, but comments, things you want, thoughts you want to share? No, Lauren, Bruno?
I'm delighted by this last comment that just came in. That's just from a phone number, so I'm not sure who said it.
It's Linda. It's Linda.
Linda, wonderful, superb work. Congratulations. Well, thank you very much for that. But ICOM will arrive to a museum definition in Prague. This is our great hope. This is our really, we're working so hard to get this passed, whatever the new definition is going to be. And the idea is that it's you guys who are telling us what this definition is going to be. And we're really happy to have had such good response rate for consultation 2. Now that you guys have the opportunity to tell us, okay, these are the terms that everybody in the world said, great. Which ones do you like? Tell us which ones you like so that we can now structure and build a new definition that we know not everybody is going to be happy with it on both sides of the spectrum. We've already heard from some, on the one hand, that they still feel that there's no need for a new definition. And on the other hand, we've heard from committees that saw the results and were a little disappointed because they said, well, this is nowhere nearly as progressive as the new definition needs to be, right? Because the results are very much middle of the way. But we feel strongly that that's what the majority of people basically want. That is the general sense of consensus that we're aiming to achieve so that a new definition passes. And why is it so important for a new definition to pass? To prod museums that haven't already moved into the future to go in that direction, because so many museums are already doing all of this. So many museums already integrate many of these more progressive values and concepts and ideas of their function in society. Many of them are already doing this, but many museums are not, or their contexts don't consider that that's what a museum should necessarily do. And if we're able to have a new definition that pushes them in that direction, well, that would be very, very, I think, helpful for many museum professionals around the world. So thank you for saying that. I hope that you all feel that same drive and excitement to get to Prague and vote on moving forward the ICOM definition to a 21st century definition, even though we're already, we'll be 2022, a quarter of the century in, but definitely hoping that that's the route. Yeah, Ophelia.
I have a question. Do you consider submitting more than one proposal or only one?
That's a very
Prague?
good question. Yeah, that's a very good question, Ophelia, because we have had a technical issue that we had to address. Initially, when we conceived the methodology in September last year, we really considered presenting at least 3 proposals for Prague. Our idea was really to give options for the committees to evaluate in the end. But then what happened was that the format of the meeting changed. And now we know that it's going to be a hybrid meeting, and the voting process is going to be an online vote. So there will be no discussion throughout the process for that specific assembly. And for this reason, what we adjusted in the methodology is that we are going to present 2 or 3 proposals, or even 1 proposal if you vote for only 1 proposal in the end, because we're going to have consultation 4, and consultation 4 will be when we present to you several options of definitions. But if after consultation 4 we still need to revise 2 or 3 definitions, we are proposing an open meeting between ICOM Define and all the representatives of ICOM committees, regional organizations and affiliated organizations, so that we can discuss. It is going to be a virtual meeting, but we will discuss the possibility of changing anything in the definition that might suit the needs of our membership. And then in the end, after that, we are going to present probably only one definition for the final vote, because it's going to be an online vote, and we will not have the possibility to vote down definitions as we wish for. So in the end, it's going to have to be a yes or no vote, but we're going to have all these other processes before to inform us which definition we should present in the final vote.